Guys, this is Connor Sudsbury here, and you're watching Riding Supercharged. And today we're going to talk about the 1985 Monte Carlo SS. A little bit of history. In 1982, the Chevy and GM had a NASCAR that was based off this car. It looked similar, but it was a NASCAR. It had a little over 180 horsepower, and people wanted it to be built for the streets. So in 1983, that's just what happened. This car debuted in the parking lots of all the GM dealerships, and this car has a 5-liter V8 that displaces 180 horsepower from a 4-speed automatic transmission. That's not bad numbers, and that car was about 10 grand brand new. Competition for the time, the Mustang GT would blow this right out of the water. But the Camaro and the Trans Am, especially the Z28 Camaro, granted, they're more expensive because you get a little bit more features, but power-wise, there's only about a 10 horsepower difference. That's not that bad. Now, what I really like about this car is very much so angled towards the new generation. In 1980s, GM heads and car companies themselves decided that they should build products for the younger generation. And that's exactly what this car did, is it did not capture the older generation. The older generation was into their 60s and 70s muscle cars, and this, I think, if you're an older person, is not that cool. Now, my dad was 19 years old in 1985. My uncle has a Monte Carlo that looks identical to this, and my dad was around when he bought it, and my dad thinks it's a really cool looking car, really sharp looking car. Some of the older people thought it was ugly, but they really, really loved it because this is the design that's going on in 30 years ago. This car is not really technologically superior. In the 80s, it didn't have anything that was really interesting. It's just got your regular halogens and your basic gauge cluster and all that. It's not a super fancy high tech car. It wasn't meant to be. It's a muscle car, not a sports car like they resold the Mustang and the Firebird to be. It's a true 80s muscle car. That's why the torque is way higher than the horsepower. But I really, really, really like this car. There's just no car to me that is as interesting. Now, the interesting part about this car, I should say, is that the front end, you can see that whole nose piece where the metal meets the plastic, is you'll see a line for the whole front nose. That whole piece is something called polyurethane, and to save weight, it's actually a plastic material. And the back end is polyurethane too. The rear bumper, the taillight housings, all that is polyurethane. And then there's the plastic rear spoiler. The rear spoiler was for looks. It didn't provide that much downforce, but that's okay, because you don't really need it for a muscle car like this. The interior was nice. It was a cloth and vinyl combination, which was pretty fancy for the time. The car to me is just really, really interesting. It's quirky, like the design of it is, at first I thought it was ugly until I got older and I just like grew to like the car more. It's not that loud and it's not that fast, because in the 80s they weren't focusing on loudness like they do now. They actually had a race amongst all the other car companies who could come up with the quietest ride quality, and that's what they did. And the '89 Buick Riviera, which is a car my brother has one of the lowest interior ride qualities of the entire 1980s. Now, I might have worded that wrong, but basically what I'm trying to say is they tried to make it quietest, and his had 65 decibels. I'm not sure what this would run at. Probably 68 decibels, 69 decibels, and that's really quiet compared to some of the cars they have now. But it is just such a cool looking car. I want to get one in real life. And with that, stay tuned.